Birth control has been used for thousands of years in human history. We can find evidence of birth control being used, from ancient Egypt to medieval Europe up until the modern age. And, people have always tried using a variety of methods to prevent pregnancy. But those earlier methods were, let's just say, not super effective. But that all changed in 1960 when the FDA approved the first oral hormonal contraceptive. Known as the pill, it became extremely popular within the first 2 years of its release, with an estimated 1.2 million women using it. And today, there's hundreds of millions of women using some form of birth control worldwide. And it could be argued that it's become one of the most important medical discoveries within the past 100 years, altering our perception of women's health, family planning, and reproductive rights. A lot has changed since that time. There's been many new forms of contraceptive introduced, since 1960, and it can be a daunting task for anyone, patient or healthcare provider, to really wrap their head around all the different forms available. But that's what I plan on doing in this mini series, where I go through every single birth control option available in the US as of September of 2025. And through this series, I think it will give us a really great look at what the field of birth control has become. It's become a field where there's many new exciting advancements and just really incredible science being introduced almost every year, it seems like. But yeah, I hope let's just get into this series, and I hope you guys will enjoy. So let's just do some quick disclaimers first, if you will. First off, this series will be split into multiple parts because when I tried to do it all in one video, it came out to like an hour and a half, and no one wants to sit through an hour and a half of me just talking about birth control. So it'll be split up into different parts and different sections where I talk about different methods and agents as we go along. Second thing, in this video, I will only be talking about hormonal in this series, I should say. I'm only going to be talking about hormonal options or medicated options, if you will. While there are other options available, like, condoms or sponges, foams, or surgical options, let's say, I'm just going to talk about the medicated options as they're most relevant to me as a pharmacist and most relevant to my practice in the United States. Other thing is that, however, I will be discussing IUDs, however, because there are medicated options, and I think for the sake of completeness on the topic, I'll just talk about all the IUDs available, whether they're medicated or not. The next thing I should say is that an interesting thing that has happened in this field is that you can have a lot of different quote-unquote generic products that are given a brand name by the company to a point where you have the same exact product being under different names, and that could be very confusing for patients. So for the most part, I will be referring to products by their generic name, and I'll mention the brand name if it's more relevant or if it's easier to remember the product, so to say. And finally, I'll also only be mentioning products within the US. While there are other products available throughout the world, I'm just going to be mentioning the ones in the US as, again, they're most relevant to me, and these are the ones that I'm just more likely to see in my practice. Okay, so for this first video, we'll discuss some basic concepts about the menstrual cycle, how pregnancy occurs, and then, some methods of birth control that are used. And then we'll mention spermicides and other miscellaneous agents for this first video. I'm hoping as we go along we can mention, oral contraceptives, rings, patches, etc. But that'll all be coming out later, just to keep everything nice and short. Okay, let's get started. So, when it comes to menstruation and pregnancy, how a quick overview would be nice, just to get an understanding of the normal function of these cycles and of how a woman's body physically and hormonally changes throughout this time. And from there, we could then understand how we could alter these cycles and these physical changes in a way where we could prevent pregnancy. So during the menstrual cycle, two hormones start being produced. You have follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH for short, and luteinizing hormone, LH for short. And these perform a variety of functions, but the main functions for FSH would be to develop the follicle, which is then, as it grows, it will develop into the egg. And then luteinizing hormone will be involved with ovulation, or that release of the egg from, the follicle into the uterus. And also during this time, you have estrogen and progesterone being produced. Now keep in mind, estrogen just refers to a whole class of sex hormones. We'll usually see estradiol being the main hormone being produced, and I will discuss estradiol in a future video when we discuss oral contraceptives. And progesterone is part of that kind of class also, but those two hormones are being produced, and they also play a variety of roles within the body. And their main roles would really be just to prepare the body in preparation for what the body believes is hopefully an egg being fertilized and implanted into the uterus. And it'll do things like thickening the lining of the endometrius, for example, so that the egg is actually able to implant itself and start developing. But what happens is that once those estrogen and progesterone levels increase, it'll cause a negative feedback loop to where the body will then start decreasing its production of FSH and LH, because it then realizes, hey, the egg is already released, we don't need to produce these two hormones anymore because they're not needed. But from there, we can see a strategy that's widely used in preventing pregnancy is that if you're able to increase those estrogen and progesterone levels artificially, you could then, in a sense, trick the body into believing that it has already released the egg, and thus it won't produce that FSH and LH, and thus an egg never gets released in the first place. And if an egg's never released, an egg never has the chance to be fertilized, and a woman does not have the chance to become pregnant. That's really the main idea behind basically all hormonal contraceptives, is by increasing either estrogen or progesterone levels or both, you could just kind of make the body go into that negative feedback loop artificially and stop the production of FSH and LH and stop the release of an egg into the uterus. And then there's also other methods that we'll discuss where they kind of more involve either preventing the egg from actually implanting itself into the uterus by thickening the lining of the endometrius, or they'll have functions as like spermicides where they will affect the sperm or affect the environment of the sperm, so that the sperm either is not able to move as well and not able to have as much mobility, or just the sperm won't be as effective in actually fertilizing the sperm. Okay, so now that that's out the way, we could get started with the spermicides and miscellaneous agents. So spermicides work by disrupting the sperm's function before it can reach the egg. And by doing this, you make it that, even if the egg's released and it's ready to be fertilized, the sperm's just not able to fertilize the egg, and pregnancy won't occur because of that. Now, the benefit of using a spermicide is that it's an on-demand method. And a lot of patients may prefer that, where instead of having to remember to, for example, take a pill every day, or, you have to kind of deal with the effects of hormonal contraceptives for like weeks or months at a time, as we'll discuss. They could just use it right before intercourse, and they don't really have to worry about it afterwards. It's also a non-hormonal option, which some patients may prefer if they feel like they get certain adverse events from hormonal contraceptives, or they just don't like the feeling of using hormones, for example. And it can also prevent certain side effects, as we discussed, like, you know, stuff like bleeding or bloating or nausea that commonly comes with hormonal contraceptives. Also, the cool thing about spermicides is that they do come in many forms. So you could get it as a gel that's just by itself and that's inserted into the vaginal cavity. You can also get it, you know, a combination with sponges or diaphragms, which are inserted into the vagina, and then the sponge or foam will secrete that spermicide to where it will have an effect also. The other cool thing is that it's over the counter. It's one of the few over the counter birth control options that people have. So, you know, if a patient, for example, is not able to go to the clinic or go to their PCP to get a prescription, or, you know, for whatever reason, or if they just don't have the time, let's say, they could go and buy this contraceptive over the counter, and I'm sure you could like buy it online. Like, I'm gonna look on Amazon. I'm sure I could find that you could buy it on Amazon, and I'll just show a picture here as an example. But keep in mind though that it does have a high failure rate. So the failure rate is around 20 to 21%, which means that out of every 100 women, we would expect 20 to 21 women to become pregnant even with using the spermicide, which it's very high. It's, you know, it's the highest among all the medicated options that we have. And, you know, comparing it with oral contraceptives where the rate is like 7%, it's, you know, it's super high, and it's one of the reasons why it's not really used too much nowadays, because you have the other options that are more widely available and by law are mostly covered by insurance, and they're just more effective. So it's not used too much. I've personally never seen anyone buying spermicide from, you know, when I was working. But it's an option that's available. Currently, there's only one spermicide available in the US called nonaxonal 9. And I'll show a picture here of its structure. Its main mechanism is that it will affect the membrane around the sperm's head. And I'll show a picture of the sperm here so you can see it. So you have the head and then the tail. It will affect the structure, it'll affect the membrane and the structure of the sperm head. And by doing that, it will decrease its mobility and just make it less effective at actually fertilizing the egg. And there's other spermicides available around the world, but this is the only one that's available in the US currently. And it does have some side effects like burning or irritation upon use. But yeah, because of those side effects and because of its decreased efficacy and because of the availability of other options, it's not really preferred in today's landscape of birth control and hormonal options. We actually have a new option that became available in 2020. It was the first non-hormonal option that has been available since nonaxonal 9 was introduced over 60 years ago. And this option goes by the brand name Phexxi, so that would be like PHEXXI. So this is a gel that contains a mixture of citric acid, lactic acid, and potassium bitartrate. And the idea behind this product is that by using this product with these acidic agents, you decrease the pH of the vaginal cavity into a acidic pH. And that acidic pH is actually harmful to sperm. And once sperm actually enters that environment, it's not able to, you know, work as well because of that acidity. It just doesn't work that great within that environment. It has proven to be more effective than nonaxonal 9 with a failure rate around 13.7%, which means that out of every 100 women using it, you could expect between 13 and 14 women to become pregnant with use, which is a lot better than nonaxonal 9, but still a lot worse than the hormonal contraceptives or the other options we'll discuss as the series goes along. And, you know, the cool thing is I've actually seen a box of this in the pharmacy, and I'll show the picture here. It comes in a box, and it comes with a few like devices where a patient could use it and actually self-insert the gel into the vagina. And, it's a very welcome development. It's one of the newer options available. But yeah, overall, it's still not as effective as the other agents that we'll discuss later on in the series. But for anyone that wants a non-hormonal on-demand option, it's available. Okay, so that wraps up the first part of this series. In the next video, we will solely be discussing oral contraceptives. And I hope as time goes along, we will be able to discuss, other interesting formulations out there and emergency contraceptives also. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and please stay tuned for the next video. See ya.